All right, guys, welcome. This is Alan Tilt Donofrio of Incline TV, bringing you a How to StarCraft series right now. This will be a Terran vs. Terran Basics here. Got two of my friends in here playing for me here. We got, just taking a look at this screen right now. Let me take a look here. We got MrWin. It's going to be going up against Dan. It's going to be a 2v2, or 1v1 Terran on Daybreak will be the map. So we're going to be focusing on Knight's gameplay here, so we'll see exactly what his strategies are. Knight, what's your strategy going to be, you think, going into this TvT matchup? What are you going to try to do off the bat here?
Banshee Rush, possibly, yeah.
Okay. So we'll be looking at a little bit of a Banshee Rush coming from Knight. We'll take a look and see how well he does that. We'll get the game started here in just a second. No big deal. And as soon as they're ready, I'll start up. So we're looking to see how Banshee play is going to go in this regular old style Terran versus Terran matchup. One of the more complex strategies that you have to kind of face when you're playing in a mirror matchup. See if Dan's ready to go here, and we'll start this sucker up. But some keys to an early Banshee Rush. You know, this is a pretty standard strategy for some Terran players. They like to go for the harasses. I don't know why he's typing what he's gonna do. Maybe he won't do that. I don't know. Maybe he's playing some mind game. I'm not sure what Dan's doing. Let me take a look real quick. Dan, what are you doing?
What am I supposed to be doing?
You're supposed to be saying you're ready so I can press the start button. Are you in game?
Hold on,
maybe having some technical difficulties.
I thought I'm good to go. I thought I was waiting on you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you're ready in game. So you're just let me know in game when you're ready.
Yeah, man, I'm all set.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get this underway. So some things for a Banshee Rush. You obviously do not want to be supply blocked because you need to get as much minerals in as possible from your supply line. You also do not want to stay too long on your barracks. You want to be sure that you're getting a lot of gas in, as you're going to need Cloak against a Terran player, especially since they have that pretty much automatic detect, as every Terran player should get an orbital command. And that's going to allow them to scan, obviously. And a map like Daybreak, it's actually a pretty good map for a Banshee Rush, because if you notice on the map, like up in the corners here, right close to the mineral line, there's that big whole space where you can kind of sneak in. There's only a little bit of a spot where you can choke off with any possible turrets. So again, the map is MLG Daybreak. We're going to be looking at MrWin here. This is his in-game name. I know him as Knight, so that's why I was calling him Knight earlier. No big deal, though. So we'll take a look and see what he does here and see how well he performs this. Again, this is a TvT Basics. We're looking at him possibly doing a Banshee Rush. He might be changing it up, but we'll take a look at just his natural build and just some things that you can just be advised as when you're playing, especially in a TvT matchup. A lot of Terran players, well, just about any matchup, same race matchup, they get kind of on edge about what they're trying to do because it's so easy to counter. Obviously, Banshees, if he gets a missile turret, it's pretty much he's got nothing left. And if Dan decides to go Marines and Marauders, or if he goes dropships, he'll have an easy way into the base there. So you have to be able to do this very efficiently. You also have to have good defenses as well to pull off any good harass. So we'll take a look at what's going on here, as there is some lag coming through. On the bottom left is, yeah, it looks like Dan's lagging a little bit. Bottom left is the blue Terran. We'll be seeing MrWin, so we're going to be focusing on mostly. We'll take a look at the production tab as well as we go through here. And in the top right position, spawning as the heart pink, I guess we'll call it light pink, soft pink, Dan the Man, going through here. So we'll focus on the things that MrWin is doing off the bat. And obviously we're going to expect to see an early gas or two. And it looks like he's going to elect to not wall, as this actually is a pretty early supply depot. He's not building any SCVs right now, so that's not what he wants to be doing. And he's actually going to send his 9th supply SCV to go scout in the corner. Typically, as a Terran player, you want to wait. You want to do what Dan's doing here. You want to wait till that 10th is building, and you can queue that 11th. This is pretty standard, so a 10 supply depot is pretty much what you would expect, and he can also queue in the 11th coming out. And by the time that this SCV is done, the supply depot will also be pretty close to done, so you'll never really get fully supply blocked, and you will be able to fully maximize your income, which, as we can see, is just a little bit higher for Dan right now. He's sitting at about 100 minerals more, and he's got 2 more harvesters, so that's going to be big. However, he does have an early barracks coming down. The barracks will finish up. So not the worst thing in the world. Dan deciding also not to block, just kind of using that as a buffer zone as MrWin will scout. This is also very smart. You always want to make sure you're scouting as a Terran player going for a harass build. This is also smart here. We'll get to what he's doing with this SCV in a minute. So good harass there. But if you're going for a natural harass build, you want to make sure you get the early scout, because if you see something crazy like early gas, you can expect something a little bit crazier to be happening. As we see, the first gas is going down. No SCV building. We want to make sure that we're always building SCVs. He's got the hotkey, which is good, but now there's an SCV finally going down. He's probably a little distracted with the harassment trying to go on in here. And it looks like it's going to be a 2 barracks look for him. As we'll take a look, and he does not see that second barracks.
Armed and ready.
We do have a Marine on the field that can be used for scouting or whatever you might need it to be. He's going to try to kill the supply depot, I guess. Good gas income coming on the bat. We'll kind of take a look at the income here. Dan is still up, light pink here. Dan is still up in harvester count. The gap is closing a little bit in minerals, not by much, but a little bit. As actually more harvesters are coming in for Dan, as his orbital command is not starting actually. So good for MrWin getting a first early-ish orbital command. Supply is doing pretty okay here. And we can see also the gas income is doing very well for him right now. One thing to keep in mind, if you do go for the gas route, and if he were to add on the second gas right now, it is always faster to mine with 2 on each rather than having 3 on one and 1 on the other. It's just a very small thing, but it does make a difference. So this is a pretty good defensive setup right now. He's got 3 Marines that can pretty much suit off whatever. We do have a reactor coming on for Dan, as Tech Lab is already done, and he's got 2 Marines on the field here shortly. We'll take a look at the income, or away from the income and on the production tab. And we'll talk a little bit more about what Dan's doing with this reactor. He does have pretty sufficient mineral income to support that reactor. As we can see, his mineral total is pretty well. Can't really say anything too much about that. We'll take a look and see what Dan's thinking here. As his gas is going, we do see a starport is going down, so this is pretty good timing so far for MrWin. Starport coming out here, and the Tech Lab going down in the factory. Hopefully, if he's smart enough, what he wants to do is have this Tech Lab finish up, and then make sure that he dances between the starport and the factory, which is what he's going to do. Very good. Again, this is another thing that, as a starting up Terran player, it helps you maximize your time. Obviously, he's going for a quicker rush, and this should be, he'll probably have his first Banshee out by 7 minutes, maybe a little bit sooner. Yeah, he's got enough minerals. Depends if he wants to go for the cloak or not. Cloak is 200, so that's pretty big. And it looks like he spent his gas on something else. He did go for the cloak. Okay, he went for the cloak. He can get his Banshee going out now. He's waypointing his starport, and that Banshee is now coming out. A little slow. He could have done that a little bit quicker, but that's okay. He does have the advantage right now, although Dan does have a lot of Marines, so it's going to be a very, very close battle. And an engineering bay. And as a Terran player playing defense against anything that could be possibly a Banshee rush, I mean, especially if you're going a ground force like he is, you see there's the 3 barracks look with 2 reactors, so he's really going to go with some heavy Marines with a little bit of Marauder support probably. And there are a lot of Marines on the field right now. Take a look at the resources and the Army tab, see what's invested there. Units-wise, he does have 15 Marines on the field, and a little bit of an SCV count right now going up for him. I would like to see Dan save a little bit of resources here and get an expansion, but we'll talk about his play later, as there is now a Banshee on the field, and he needs to be starting to move with this now. As a Terran player, you can't expect to mass up Banshees and have that be successful for you. I do like the reactor add-on because, again, it's 150 and 100 for a Banshee. And in that waiting time that you are putting out this Banshee, which does take a full minute to do, you could be pumping out some Marines or adding on and doing some other things. The bunker's a good add-on, so he is going for a defensive look. It is in a good spot, too, so it won't get too hit from the down area here, from below the cliff. So that's good. He has a siege tank coming out, cool, but there's no siege research. That siege tank will be pretty crucial, though, in defending. There's that siege research we're looking for. And that's going to be good in trying to hold off this mostly just Marine push here, as there is no factory, no starport coming out for Dan. And if we take a look at what Dan sees, he's trying to take out some rocks in case there's the natural a little bit more of an open gateway for him to push through.
Upgrade complete.
And Dan has no idea. This is what Dan needs to be scouting on something. He needs to be using a scan to see what's going on. He's totally blind to what's going on right now. And that expansion is going down, but now we do have the Banshee moving around the map. And it looks like he's deciding to put on a reactor. I'm not sure what happened to the tech lab necessarily. He might have blew it up or something. I missed that. So 2 Banshees, that's totally enough to go push and get some kills on these this mineral line, which is pretty loaded up here. He does have 31 full, and this is okay. That's okay. So he halts this production here. If Dan is ready for this, which it doesn't look like he's going to be. Ooh, a sensor tower going up too. That's interesting. Siege research is done just in time. And he's distracted right now. He needs to be putting these Banshees in here. Dan also needs to be putting up some turrets or getting some Marines in his base. He's not ready for this whatsoever. I don't know if he even realized that this died. He might have thought it was Marines. And this is going to cause some damage here, as he will take out a good number of these SCVs. Take a look at the wrong button. Workers kill tab creeping up here as we get closer to 10, 11, totally finishing out most of that mineral line. He is going to this cloak it up here and do some damage. That's good work there. Dan is forced to pull back those Marines, and right now with the siege tanks, I mean, he needs and a sensor tower down, which is, I mean, is a little preemptive, but that's okay. He can see that there's no one in this area. He needs to be moving these siege tanks up so he can expand himself, and it looks like he's about to do that exactly as there is a command center coming down. Lots of minerals, though. You need to be spending your minerals when you come through here, and there are now turrets coming up, so a smart thing here for the Terran player, you want to make sure that you don't overcommit to doing one thing in particular. When it comes to Banshee harass against another Terran player, you can't stay there for too long. Right now he is super supply blocked at 59 or 52, 57, or sorry, 59, 59, that's correct. And he's not building any supply depots right now. He's just building the one. But when you get to the point when you're that supply depot blocked, queuing up units is smart, which he's got a few queued just to make sure. He could be putting down some mules to help his income stay frosty, but he's a little focused over here right now. If I'm MrWin, I'm not looking to do anything else with these Banshees. As far as harassing this mineral line, these are just too many missile turrets, so a good defense there, but again, we see exactly how many units that were killed in there. 12 workers were killed by MrWin, which puts him close. He actually puts him in the lead here for harvesters, which is really, really good. Look at the production tab, and it looks like now he will be going for just straight up just encroachment with just the regular biological land units, going with the STEM upgrade and Terran Weapons 1. Dan's still trying to finish out this core, command center, as there is a nice-sized army now coming across. And this is what's pretty crucial. There was a period of time, and even right now, his mineral count is way too high. He needs to be building more barracks if he's going to go for this. Another, well, he does have another engineering bay. He needs to make sure that he's upgrading on that, and make sure he also has hotkeys for that to make sure he knows where exactly to do with those. But overall, the Banshee harass was fairly successful. It caused Dan to lose about 10 harvesters, and it cost them 600 minerals for the defense, which is pretty big when you think about things in those terms. And it has halted production severely, and it looks like Dan flipped out about that a little bit. It's going to go with an extra starport. Not sure why exactly. His mineral income is not super great, as MrWin will see the army here, and he is out upgraded 1-to-1 for Dan. Nothing else coming, though, as there's no armory down. That's another thing. If you're going for straight upgrades, you need to make sure that A, you're obviously active with those upgrades, as he's not active here. And B, once they're about ready to time up and complete, you need to make sure you put an armory down so you can keep those upgrades coming. As we can see, there is a lot of mineral income for MrWin, so he really needs to be pumping out Marines right now, and we see these barracks are completely idle. So we want to make sure that you're always using those. Pretty much the way I like to think about it, I am also a Terran player myself. Whenever I move out, I usually will just hit my hotkey for my barracks, which I also usually set as somewhere between 1 and 3. And I'll just spam A few times just to make sure I have those queued up, and if I don't have enough minerals, then hey, I don't have enough minerals. It's no big deal. I'm obviously not spending those anywhere else right now, so it's not a big deal. Okay, now he finally is going for the more barracks, so that's smart. It's a little bit late, as his income is still super high. If we take a look at the income coming through right now, Dan is catching back up in the harvester count, but I'm pretty sure that units on the field, yep, the mule is on there, so it helps a little bit. and we still see that these Banshees will try to do a little bit. Right now, I mean, you have to figure as a Terran versus Terran, you need to use these Banshees for something other than harassing. You can use it for scouting, which is he's kind of doing right now. We can see what he sees, which he sees more of this base. I don't know if he saw the siege tank or not. Able to scout out pretty well. A good scan right there. We also want to make sure as a Terran player, you do scan before you come in. And right now, with this full cloak, he needs to go in and try to snipe off a little bit of these siege tanks because those are super dangerous. And it looks like Dan will play with the rocks here. Smart. It's good positioning right there. I'm not sure what MrWin saw. I guess he can see those, so that's good. Knowing not to push in there, Dan will open up some space. Now, as a defensive player, you actually want to keep those rocks there because your siege tanks are in actually a pretty good spot there. They were covered by those rocks. They are no longer that anymore with those rocks gone. It looks like Dan's going to get a little aggressive. He thinks he had something there. He does not, and he's going to actually find himself completely baited out if MrWin were to come around the side here. And it looks like he's going to get caught off guard. Do they see each other? No, they don't. So both of them are a little lost, and it looks like a good scouting with the one Marine there. He needs to put these into siege mode. He's going to get caught off guard. The siege is a little late, and Dan has an advantage here. Skimmed in, and it looks like he's pulling off. Yeah, you know, I would have actually liked to see him with the siege tank still set up with these little reinforcements coming through. He would have been more successful. A little bit miss micro there on that one siege tank, and he will end up pushing this back. We look at the supplies, and Dan is still up in supply, but production we can see looks like there's actually no production coming in for MrWin right now. And make sure as a Terran player, I mean, everyone says it, hold down the A key to win, and that's exactly what you need to be doing. He's got 3 barracks right now with reactors, and he can be pumping out 6 at a time, and he's going to get these queued gone, and he's going to still have over 1,000 minerals he could be spending here. Again, we look at the upgrades, still no armor upgrade coming, no armory, and we can see for a while now, he's got 3 idle workers right now on the floor. As a new player and someone who's looking to advance, these workers could be doing something right now. They could be building more. They don't need to be building supply depot walls. You can start building barracks walls and factory walls as you want to make sure you're also maximizing your production. Another thing, since there's a lot of map control going on right now, for MrWin, he should be able to also expand again. We can take a look at his third. It's not really all that saturated. He has not been producing too many SCVs. He can produce more as he only has 32 on the field right now between 2 bases. Typically, somewhere between 26 and 30 is what you would expect for just one base. The 3 in the gas included in that, so mostly you figure 26. Somewhere between 20 and 26 for an actual mineral line. He needs to transfer some of these too because you can't really see it, but some of these SCVs are actually waiting to work right now a little bit, and they could be moving over here. If we take a look at the action going on in the field right now, he's trying to get some harassment with that Banshee. He did lose one of them. So there's only one Banshee. I'm just going to try to stim in here. This is a pretty bold move, considering he's got no backup line here, and some pretty interesting micro coming out here for MrWin, aka not super great. With stim Marines, you need to make sure you're always just sticking in the fight, and if you need to retreat with siege tanks, just have your siege tanks lined up to somewhere where right around this beacon would have been nice, around the tower. He could have had them completely covered up by the little smoke and had extra vision, and then when he retreated back, he would have been able to come through and retreat to that line and been safe, a lot more safe than that, as he is now completely down in supply, as Dan is doing much better. He's just sticking with the same Marines, nothing crazy, as he now will get a 3rd base down. So smart play by him here. We'll get into more of that. I would have liked to see MrWin just take the secure position, hold them on 2 bases for now, maybe put some sporadic harassment on these gases, as this turret does not cover that, and I'm pretty sure he sees that, yeah. So he could put some harassment down, like right where he is right now, on this mineral line, this gas geyser too. Not the case, though, as he does get another Marine kill right there. So now we see across the board a lot of inactive production facilities. Another thing, there's a lot of extra supply being put down, putting in the extra supplies on the supply depots, which means Dan was not paying very good attention to his supply. And this should be an easy pick-off right here. You can if he does not cancel this, is the 300 minerals that were spent there. Easy goes. So that's a bad no cancel there, as that did cost him 100 minerals. he will get another missile turret up to help protect this threat. And it looks like there's going to be a push here, and everything will be seen right now. And looks like he's going to try to meet this pretty head-on. Two siege tanks in support. The only thing right now, these siege tanks are also killing his own units. He needs to be staying closer to the line, protecting these from getting stimmed on. He will still hold as just stranded more. I think there's just more medics than that, more medevacs. And obviously the 2 siege tanks helped a lot for him there. So that's a pretty good defensive hold for MrWin. As we do see upgrades are starting to stream in a little bit more. Still no armor coming in right now as he is low on minerals. Lots of gas though, and right now as he is completely mined out, pretty much except for this one who's got 80 minerals left, he is completely mined out, and as natural he needs to be putting down a third. He just gained map control, and that's one thing as a new player, you need to make sure that you need to understand what map control actually means. Obviously for MrWin right now, he controls everything on this side of the map. He can see down this ramp. Unless there's a drop that comes from behind and sneaks behind him, he can see everything that comes out of Dan's base right now. So he should be free to expand. This is a smart expansion as well, as this area has been mostly contested so far. Dan has come through this area a lot when he counter pushes, so this is not a poor place for his third. Usually the natural third would be in this bottom, this right location. Dan's in his natural third, as it was actually scouted there, and this is going to be a good opportunity. And again, with his map control, it's smart leaving a Marine here. He knows if he's going to get taken from behind, and he's going to use these as some backup support, trying to bait out these Marines. Good play there, not losing any of his units. He's going to be free to take over this planetary. I think it was turning into a planetary. Couldn't quite morph all the way. 3 SCV kills. If we take a look at the workers killed, 28 workers killed to 2. That's pretty big. Overall, units killed is in favor of MrWin. If we take a look at resources across the board, that's what we're looking at. And armies, same thing. If we take a look at spending, though, this is interesting to see. Pretty even across the board all the way through. More upgrades. Terran level 2 coming out for Dan a little later than what he would like, as Weapons 2 is done for MrWin. He's not working on a third, though. He needs to make sure he's active with those upgrades. That's one thing that you want to make sure you're keeping in touch with, especially when your income is very high, which his is. Lots of idle buildings as well. Again, as you're pushing around on the map, you're trying to use your micro to push around as a Terran player, or any player for that matter, you want to make sure that when you're doing any kind of move, just always check your production buildings. If you're not building something and you have this much, like right now he's not doing anything but trying to saturate his third with mules, he could be putting more than just 5 Marines out. He can be putting 6 out at a time, and so he doesn't have one there. And he can have more queued up, he can have upgrades going. There's just a lot of options where you can be spending the surplus of money right now. Doesn't have to worry about supply, as he's a good 50 supply under, and he's only building Marines right now, with a few siege tanks every now and again, a few medevacs every now and again. Dan, on the other hand, lots of gas, not so many minerals. It did get hurt really badly there from that one attack, as we see vehicle weapons level 2. Upgrades are starting to come out, so it sounds like he's watching the stream as I say something, as he is finally getting things done after a delay. Dan is opting for the ship plating, lever 1, probably mostly for those medevacs. It does give them an extra armor. Not really anything that I would say is totally necessary, as usually medevacs are not going to be focused by a Terran player all that much. Typically you might worry about that when you're playing a Protoss player that's trying to blink and kill out some of those medevacs. That might be an option, but still, it really doesn't make too much of a difference. You'd rather be investing into your attack and armor for your biological, if that's your case, which now he is, going for 3 and 3. So it looks like actually Dan will be up on the biological upgrades for his land units, and vehicle weapons level 2 coming out now for MrWin, so his siege tanks will be putting on some big hurt, as this is kind of bold, putting down a 4th base. But again, with map control, he should feel secure doing that, because he can see anything that comes out of his base right now, unless there's a drop. And right now he's actually staging a drop of his own, which is really smart. If he sneaks it in the right spot, he can do a lot of damage to the supply depots here and a lot of the production facilities of Dan. These turrets will hurt, and to be honest, at this stage in the game, there's no real reason to try to drop on his mineral end, because there is none. Same thing over here. He's starting to get mined out a little bit. We are 29 minutes into this Terran vs. Terran game. This is a low-level game. I'm pretty sure both these players are silver, low silver, maybe high bronze. And it looks like this is going to be a win here for MrWin, as he did successfully pull off that Banshee Harass early. And with a scan coming through, he's going to realize that, hey, I have much more of an army. I can go in. So he spreads out his forces pretty nicely there to try to spread out the packing of what gets damaged down there. He needs to keep pushing in here. He's got the advantage, and there goes the 2 siege tanks cleaning up the rest of this here. Actually, I don't think he's hit this siege tank yet. He actually completely blinded himself with these medevacs. I don't think he could actually focus it, but the drop did happen here. Going to take out the factory, 1 starport, make that 2 if he starts bunkering these Marines better. He is now focusing on getting more and more upgrades. Right now he needs to be focusing on getting out the rest of these buildings, as Dan is kind of left to pretty much face the music here, as it doesn't look like he's got too many options. Trying to get as many Marines out as he can, but I think it's going to be too little too late, as there's going to be too much damage done. You can see the surplus coming down, and it looks like MrWin won't take this one, barring something miraculous. And the only real thing I can see Dan doing right now is if he were to stage some kind of miraculous drop to hurt this economy, and it pulls back his army. But even still, he's not going to be able to fend off against this. Too many upgrades across the board. He does have the extra attack, plus the medevac will eventually secure this for him, as it's just more medevacs just kind of blindly coming in. I'm taking random cannon fodder from these turrets, so a little poor micro there, but that's okay. Again, this is the low-level ladder game. And when we get through with this, as again we can see, even though this game is relatively over, he does need to be producing more. There's nothing in production right now, so many idle production buildings. He could be using all of this space for barracks or factories or whatever. I mean, you can kind of use that as a makeshift wall as a Terran player, especially when you have good map control. You don't really need to worry about a wall so much. A defensive wall, rather, not a full wall. You don't want to actually go off and full wall this, because then you won't be able to put any reactors or tech labs on there. So there is the GG dropping out from Dan, and it looks like the Banshee Harass is successful. We will get both of these players into the same chat here and talk about the game to both of them and see what was going through both of their minds, as I'll make sure that they save their replay. Get them going here. Let's say hi to the guys. Did you guys save your replays, I hope?
Am I supposed to do that beforehand?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you can do it if you're still on the score screen.
There we go.
Cool. Let's pull it up. MrWin, congratulations, GG's to both of you. How do you feel about your Banshee Harass? Do you think it went well?
It failed, honestly.
You think it failed, really?
I kind of did it, yeah, I kind of did it too late.
Okay. Well, load up.
It did its work psychologically.
Yeah, it definitely did. Load up the replay and I'll count down for us to start from 0. Let me know when you guys are ready.
Ready.
Dan, you all loaded up and ready to go? Dan.
How do you load up a replay?
You got to go in the top left panel. There is a little camera looking thing. Just click on it and it'll take you to your replay list that you have saved. Clearly Dan is new to this, so hey, if you're ever wondering, that's how you load up a replay in StarCraft 2. You got it?
Yeah, it's loading.
Okay, let me know when you guys are loaded up and we'll count down from 0.
I'm loaded.
Dan, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, and live. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We all synced? Somewhat, yeah. Okay, so MrWin, take me through your mindset here in the early part of the game and just kind of walk me through what you're thinking going into this Banshee. Like, what is your key principles? What are your timings looking like and all that?
Getting the Banshees out as fast as possible.
Okay, obviously getting Banshees out as fast as possible, but now explain why you would go for the supply depot at 8 and not at like 10, which is a standard supply depot placement.
Actually, kind of messed up there, actually. On the blind, I thought I had an SCV at each mineral line, but I guess I didn't.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing I talked about. Pretty much to maximize your income as a Terran player, you want to make sure that you're producing SCVs until the 10th one starts building, and building the supply depot as the 10th one starts building. That's the best way to maximize your income that way. And then the early barracks as well before you got supply blocks, so that's fine. You get your barracks out early, which is good. Obviously gets it out of the way. Dan, you kind of forgot to put your barracks there as you hit 150, but that's okay. And Dan decided to go for no wall, so you're just going for the straight 3 racks, it looked like off the bat?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you think that your Banshees were out slow. Actually, your timing wasn't awful. It could have been faster if you maximized your resources. What you did right here against the barracks was actually really good. You got him from stopping building that barracks for a while, and you made him pull another SCV off the line, except you got yourself trapped a little bit, so... Boom. Gas went up fine. You need to make sure you're always producing SCVs when you have minerals, though, as right now you have almost 100 minerals, and finally you start building another SCV. Just make sure your SCVs are always going, especially since you have your command center hotkeyed, which is obviously something you always want to do. Just make sure you always have SCVs queued in the early part of the game. Dan, you did a pretty good job of that, actually, all the way through, getting your second racks out at a pretty good time, considering that you were getting a little harassed there by that SCV. Another thing that you forgot to do, Dan, was scout better. I mean, you scouted the early part. Yeah. You saw that he had a wall, but when you don't have actual insight of what's going on in his base, your orbital command was slow, by the way. But you want to make sure you use one of those scans some point of the game just to see what his production buildings are going to be, to make sure that he's not doing anything crazy like getting a Banshee rush on you. Because you had the engineering bay down, and you could have defended against it a lot better, sooner rather. And it wouldn't have done nearly as much damage, and it wouldn't have done as much psychological damage either. But that's okay.
Yeah, I got you.
The factory was good timing there. Usually what I like to say is, as you're getting your factory down, throw up your second gas, which you started to do a little bit after. But the second gas came at pretty good timing, considering. But you obviously, if you consider the fact that the cloak for Banshees is 200-200, and a Banshee itself is 150-100, and gas takes forever to mine, you need to make sure that your gas is coming in at a steady rate. And you had a little bit of a delay there. It wasn't the best break of timing for getting the cloak and the first Banshee out. It was really close. You could have done it a little bit sooner that way. Another thing is, as your second Banshee was nearly completed, you could have taken your first Banshee and started to harass or at least scout the area without wasting a scan. As the cloak was done, you could have used that to kind of take a breeze by and see if you had any defenses at all, and then you could have backed up and waited. You also, we'll get to it when you get there, actually, I won't talk about it right now. But the good dance between the factory and the starport, that's exactly what you need to do. But again, if you take a look at your minerals, you do have a lot kind of sitting around. You could have built the more SCVs sooner. You kind of had your orbital command idle for a little bit, but that's okay, as you were able to. If you look at your minerals right now, you're at 350 and 250. You could be putting out both the cloak and a Banshee, and you were a little slow getting both of those out. It just was like slight mistiming. So it would have costed you like 5 seconds more. Not a big deal. Dan, with the amount of Marines that you had, this is exactly when you need to scan and see how much harass you can pull off. You got to figure at 6 minutes into the game, Siege is not completed yet. And if by the time you get there knocking on his door by around 6:30, about closer to 7 minutes, you will be able to actually do a lot of damage to where he's not going to remember that he either has a siege tank coming or he's going to forget in total that he needed to upgrade siege. And you would have done a lot of damage to him early, especially considering you have 2 reactors on, which I think was a little bit premature on your part, just because you weren't able to actually surplus all 3 barracks with 2 reactors at the same time. So that might have been a little early for that 3rd reactor, but overall it was pretty close to on par for you. What else is going through your head right now? Especially now you have a Banshee on the floor. What's going through your head right now, MrWin?
I believe I scanned his base sometime, but my Marine battle Zonaga Tower died, so I was expecting a rush. So I left my Banshee back in my base just to support my Marines since I don't have that much, and I did put a bunker down.
Yeah, the bunker was very smart, and that position's actually really, really good, mostly because he cannot shoot you from below the ramp at all, anywhere there. He would have to be like on the very top part of the ramp to hit that bunker, or like there only one or two could hit it from below, so that's good placing there. Typically, I like to preach, if you're going to go for something like a Banshee rush or any kind of cheese rush with any kind of race, if anyone's out there watching trying to do like a Void Ray rush for Protoss, make sure you always have some kind of defense lined up. So the bunker was good. Whether you scouted him coming from the towers or not, I mean, obviously being able to scout that's very smart. But always having a line of defense is smart. The siege tank was also really good. I liked the siege tank a lot. You didn't overcommit to having Banshees. 2 is usually the most I would ever recommend, because by the time it takes you to actually harass and be successful, he will have turrets up in just the amount of time that it would take you to get a third one produced and over there. So 2 is the prime number. You can even do it with 1 against certain races, like obviously a Zerg. You could do it with 1 a lot easier. Dan, you try to go in here, and unfortunately for you, Siege just got done, and I don't think MrWin realized it until it was a little bit after that push, and then he finally sets up. So a little late there, Dan, as you do have like 15 Marines on the floor right now. Actually, you have 31 done and ready to go.
Exactly. Back then, about like a minute ago, you were using Marines to kill off some bots. I feel like you should have actually went in. So probably like called GG right there for me.
Another thing about using Banshees kill SCVs in 2 burst shots. So you want to try to maximize your efficiency in using them by spreading them on each on one side of the mineral line, so they can both attack different sides and they can get a little bit more kills. But if you take a look at workers killed, you're already up to 12. Dan has only killed 1, which is just in the beginning, so it doesn't even really count. And then, Dan, a problem here is you take all of your forces back to defend against 2 Banshees. When you already have an engineering bay, all you need to do is put down the 3 turrets you did and keep those 12 or so Marines in your base, and you actually could have counter-pushed a little bit, or at least held him from getting an expansion. Another thing about harassing, and if you realize, since you had your sensor tower down, MrWin, that he pulled back his army, you need to move out further and faster and secure your line, and then throw down a quicker natural. As soon as you see that his army is leaving, you need to be throwing down the natural, because your mineral surplus and your actual bank is super, super high throughout most of this game, and you'll end up having a lot of production buildings idling. Right now, you're stuck on 59 supply for like a minute and a half before you get another supply depot down. Make sure you're keeping your eye on your supply, especially when you're in a meta game where you're trying to harass. You want to make sure that you can shift click and shift Q for one SCV to build multiple ones. All you need to do is just press BS and then shift, and then just keep clicking until you run out of minerals, pretty much. That's one way to do that. Dan, again, you have so many Marines just not doing anything right now. And you spent 600 minerals, 700 minerals on missile turrets when you have almost 100 energy to scan, so maybe overcommitting there. And then the mind games did definitely start to catch in as you decided to build 2 starports to try to counter, which I wasn't sure if you're trying to go for Vikings at some point or if you're just trying to mass produce dropships. But as someone playing for dropships, really to maximize your spending, and I mean right now you have 3 idle barracks not doing anything. You really only need 1 starport with a reactor to surplus your actual need for your status quo for medevacs, so you don't need 2 starports all the way through.
Yeah, 2 was overdue.
Definitely was. The bunker was good near the expansion, MrWin. Dan, what's going through your mind right now as you just kind of, you lost, I mean, there's only 12 harvesters, and you actually caught back up relatively quickly. So what's going through your mind right now as you're trying to defend and keep map control and get an expansion up after getting harassed by a bunch of Banshees?
I was trying to focus on just getting back up the Marines. I like the medevacs, which is why I threw down the Starport, possibly some Siege, because I didn't want to go on with just Marines.
Right. Smart. It would have been really smart to get a few more siege tanks. I think your defenses were fine. However, if you're going to be going for a heavy biological stance with, Marines and medevacs, you want to make sure you have 2 engineering bays and an armory ready to go and pop so you can get your upgrades out sooner. That's another thing. You guys have a lot of idle SCVs at almost all times. You need to make sure that you're always keeping track of that, and you always have your SCVs either mining or building. MrWin, you do well in putting up barracks. After your income starts to skyrocket, you could have put them down earlier, and when you go back and watch the stream and when you watch me cast the first game, you'll start hearing the things, and eventually it kicks in that, hey, I actually need to do this, and you just forgot. Until it was almost a little bit too late. I mean, it ended up working for you, but right now you have an armor that could be being researched in one of your engineering bays, an armory that could be going down so you can keep your next weapons going on, and you can still be producing more barracks and more units. Feel free, as a Terran player with reactor play, to always have more than enough Marines queued. And one thing that I was talking about in the stream was when you start moving your army forward, since you do, I mean, obviously you want to have your production facilities hotkeyed. Just whenever you move your army, check your production buildings and just spam the key that you want. And if you don't have enough minerals, then you don't have enough minerals. But what you can be doing, since you're going to be hitting over the 1,000 mark here pretty soon, you can just be holding down the A key in whatever your barracks are hotkeyed to. And also, you need to make sure that you're still upgrading all the way through. And your medevac production's fine. Your SCV production's very slow. You can be having SCVs coming out more across the board here as well, as you never really get fully saturated in your natural until you have like 4 bases, kind of crazily.
I noticed I stockpiled a lot of my energy as well on my second.
This fight right here, this is a really interesting fight. You were going to win this fight because you have more siege tanks, and they were actually piggybacked pretty well, and you had a pretty good, I mean, you had 2 medevacs, 2 marauders, and some marines coming into support. You could have probably saved 2 of your siege tanks if you were just to stay there and kind of fight and just kind of back up your land force to your siege tank line. You would have done fine there because Dan's not going to commit there, as he was going to get overmatched by siege tank power. So that was an interesting fight, as you actually did drop below in supply every time you had a big fight moment. You actually dropped in supply quite a bit. So just make sure you keep that in mind as well when you're playing through that. And then Dan, you actually do pretty well. The one thing I didn't like was that you actually knocked out those rocks on that ramp right there, which was a natural cover for your siege tanks. They couldn't get stemmed on and pushed on. So if you're playing defensively with those siege tanks, try to keep those rocks there longer until you're really looking to take control of the Zelnaga Tower, and then you can destroy those rocks better. This is good siege tank play right here when you start firing on from a distance. That was good siege tank play for you MrWin. But this next fight that you have coming up here, you start to overextend up the ramp a little bit. And when you want to try to test and push your limit a little bit and try to like see what kind of elbow room you can get on top of the ramp, keep your siege tanks down so you have somewhere to retreat to. So, I mean, you might lose a portion of your army, but you won't lose as much if you don't have a siege tank backup sit there and help you out. Also, you could have used those Banshees to finish off this siege tank, which I think you finally do, yes. You did do that. So never mind. Don't mind me for saying that. Another thing with your Banshees, as you did still have 2 out, you did a good job picking off that 1 siege tank. But if you notice, and if you look at your vision, you actually see it accurately in this base. You could actually harass and take out this refinery that he has, this first most forward refinery. And you would have been able to harass him better with that. And this is what I was talking about. You could have kept your siege tanks, both of them, back, and had just a few reinforcements, and you would not have lost this entire army, which you actually pretty much do. When you're testing your elbow room on top of a ramp, just make sure you have somewhere to retreat to, because you don't want to be facing a stim army, retreating all the way back across the map, which you're still doing right now. And if Dan were to use his stim, he could have actually picked off that whole army, not that it really would have made too much of a difference. But you could have held your line a little bit better. Siege tanks are like the scariest thing against in a TvT, just because you can make so much ground shifting happen as a Terran player with stim, but the moment that Dan runs into a line of siege tanks, he's not going to continue to push, just because they will fall. His Marines will fall so much quicker to those siege tanks than your siege tanks will fall to his Marines. It's one of those psychological things that can affect the game. Another thing, map control. Dan uses his map control pretty well. As he pushed your army back, he moved and started taking a third base, so good job, Dan. Obviously, your defense could have been better if you had more siege tanks, but if you look at your production buildings, you're not building really much at all. You have a lot of idle things, considering you're sitting on 600 minerals and 1,800 gas. Same thing, you don't have an armory still, so you're not upgrading. Tech lab, you don't have concussive shells, but you don't need them, obviously. You need to cancel this missile turret, it saves you 100 minerals. And then same thing to you, Mr. When you need to go and check out to see, you could obviously have taken out that second turret if it were to push that way. Dan, probably a little bit of an overextension here, trying to get into the base, knowing that he has had time to resurplus. As you see, you'll lose all of your army in this battle right here. Mostly because you're about to be out upgraded here pretty soon. But a little bit of overextension there, Dan. You pretty much could have just sat at that Zelnaga tower outside his base and held him down to not go anywhere pretty much for a while. And then again, right now, a good salvage of the bunker. That's a good save of minerals. You have so much energy on both of your orbital commands right now, Mr. When you can be dropping mules like crazy, and you eventually start to do that. You need to be putting your third up as soon as you regain map control, which you eventually do, but it takes you a little bit longer than I would have liked to see. You could have had your income come much higher. But I think the level that both of you are at right now, you're both playing very evenly. The big difference in this game was upgrades and siege tank numbers. Both of you, though, kind of just food for thought, things that you need to be doing is just making sure that when you're moving out while you're microing your army, you need to make sure that you're spamming your production facilities so you're always producing more behind it. Whether it's actual units, or if it's upgrades, or if it's supply depots, or if it's SCVs, or if you're trying to like expand, just make sure you're focusing on like one or two things while you're pushing your army out, because all it takes is A and left click, clicking A, clicking left click to go to a part of a map to have your army move somewhere. And if it gets in trouble, just spacebar to get to it really quickly. It'll take you to the last known event. Or if you have your army hotkeyed, just press the hotkey, obviously, and then just make them retreat. This was actually a pretty good push right now on the third base, baiting out for the siege tanks right there, and also keeping one Marine behind at the tower so you can see if he has anyone coming in from behind you. That was a really good take of that third expansion. Again, Dan, you had no one there to help you out defending that. You don't need to be making 4 medevacs right now, as you do still have 2 in the field. You need to be putting out siege tanks. You have a lot of gas, so much gas, and Mr. Win, you have so many minerals. And when you're in a position like this, Mr. Win, or just either way, whenever you guys have map control, obviously the big thing is if you can afford it and you can surplus it, take another base. If not, or if you still have more minerals left over, look at your natural right now, the ramp out to that Zelnaga tower, Mr. Win, where that area is. It's so much area where you can be putting down factories or more barracks or anything to get that more production coming out your way. So kind of try working towards that. Your take of the third was really good. Dan, you were getting pretty bold and brave by trying to take a third further south when you had no map control, but you really didn't have an option, so I don't really blame you for that. What's your feeling right now, though, Mr. Win, as you're sitting in a 3-base position with map control? How are you feeling right now as far as just the overall game is going?
Right there, after that, when I took out his third, I was feeling pretty confident. From there, I actually thought, I was going to win this.
Yeah, that was a pretty crucial moment. I mean, you're 27 minutes into the game, probably about 25 when you killed the expansion. You just kind of, one thing to be aware of is what time you are in the game and when usually mineral lines get exhausted. Obviously, his main's been mined out. Well, both your mains have been mined out for a while. Dan, you have like 7 SCVs just chilling by that mineral line you need to be doing something with. Obviously, it's hard to do since you're running out of space. But you could be having them on gas right now, considering that you only have 2 people on gas in your natural. So you could be doing that, or you could be building some defenses since you're in a defensive spot right now, as you don't have any map control. You need to try to hold as much as you can. Good take of the 4th base. The one thing I didn't like was your natural is now getting fully saturated. Like, it finally got fully saturated about like 2 minutes ago. And you could have just pumped out some more SCVs to get your income going on, your economy going on. But if you take a look, I mean, you're sitting over 2,000 minerals and over 1,500 gas. Pretty much what that says is you need to be obviously producing from your facilities, which you just started doing again. You can be producing 6 Marines at a time. It's 25 seconds for a Marine, so if you do the math, you can be producing up to 24 Marines a minute. Just off those 3 barracks. And considering that even if you were to queue up 6 Marines total on each thing, you would still have a ton of minerals left. You could be putting out more factories, or you could be teching up to Thors or battle cruisers or something that is like just one of those bigger units just to try to put the finishing blow. More siege tanks, anything. Upgrades. Your upgrades were taking a while to get going. You had enough minerals to support it, you just forgot about it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. There's a lot to think about, especially when you're in this part of the game. Obviously, when it's earlier on, it's a lot easier to focus on the economy side and the production side. So when you start adding in controlling a military, you start to forget like those key things, like supporting your economy and making sure your army size is still keeping up with the right size. This drop is pretty good, but you forgot about it when you started pushing in. Just make sure you micro that better a little bit. Again, all it takes is A and left click into this base, and you'll be able to just auto kill stuff. And at this point, I mean, after you took the 3rd base, it was pretty much GG. So we'll go ahead and exit out of that. Closing thoughts, though, from the 2 of you. How about Mr. Knight? How do you think you played overall?
Honestly, I felt like I played pretty poorly. I felt I played a lot better.
I'd say overall you did pretty okay. Obviously, you could be doing better with your mid-game action with producing and all of that. But overall, I mean, I think the Banshees worked pretty well. They were a little slower than they could have been, but for silver, not bad, to be honest. It really wasn't bad at all. So I can't really say that it was poor play. It just wasn't the best you could make it, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Dan, if you want to jump out of that replay, I can invite you into the game, and you guys can jump into a second game. And Dan, what about you? What are you thinking? How do you think you played in that game?
I need to scout more actively. That's always a bad habit I have to break out of, not scouting, because I think there were a couple times in the beginning when I could have won it.
Yeah, it definitely could have been the case. But hey, it's still early and we're all learning. So we have our battle plans going through the way here. You guys can go ahead and drop down in different channels. I'm going to go back, and we can start up your second game here with those things in mind. Good luck to both of you. And so that's kind of just a look in at what we got going on so far. We can see that both players had their mishaps. But overall, there are some good things to learn there as a Terran player. The big thing, and this is where those plateaus start to shape. As you move from bronze to silver, silver to gold, gold to platinum, if you get to that far, it's all about controlling every single aspect of the game. And yeah, okay, thanks, duh. But if you really think about it, the early game, you seem like you're so easygoing because all you're focused on is building your SCV economy and building up your production facilities and getting a small army out. But once you start controlling your army, just naturally you start thinking about nothing but that army, and you forget to produce, you forget to add on more facilities to help buffer up your army, to help get your production value moving faster. And another thing is controlling your economy as well. And obviously as you move further into the game, you want to be able to have a higher economy so you can support a bigger, more technologically thorough army. So that would mean siege tanks if you're a Terran player in this case, or medevacs, or Vikings, or Banshees, or battle cruisers, or whatever it happens to be. So we'll take a look at this game again. We have MrWin again, spawning in the bottom left is the blue Terran, and in the top right we are looking at Dan in the light soft lavender, spawning as Terran as well. And we'll see if they take things into account here as we jump through. Again, I'm Donofrio, bringing you this How to StarCraft series. We'll be bringing an educational series pretty regularly. If you want to be on the show, please look at our twitch.tv account, and in the regular description it'll have a how to be on our show. Feel free to send us an email or Twitter at us at InclineTV. We'd be more than happy to cast you guys out, as it looks like off the bat MrWin is taking the advice of keeping production in these SCVs and putting the supply depot down as soon as you hit 10 food, so that's good. That is obviously, as I reiterate one more time, is the best way to make sure you're always keeping income in the loop. He is not producing an SCV right now as he needs to be, as he still has that one slot to feed. It looks like it's going to be an instant barracks, and then an SCV. So you can time that better. You can put your 11th SCV to come out, and while this supply depot is nearly completing, the SCV will also complete. They need to wait like maybe a matter of 5 seconds before you have enough minerals for the barracks. It's not that big of a deal. So it looks like Dan is taking the exterior route while MrWin's taking the interior route, so they're not going to see each other. Dan again opting for no wall. MrWin opting for a wall, so maybe some more concealed play coming out, as there are 2 gases coming out relatively the exact same time. Barracks is relatively close. MrWin's going to get his a few seconds beforehand. Not a big deal, though. Take a look at the units tab. Even in the harvester count. Pretty self-explanatory there. I guess I should probably get a name panel going up here. Take a look at the food. Look at the income coming in. Looks like it's kind of just sitting around the halfway point. There is a little bit more gas coming in right now from MrWin, as he probably put 2 more SCVs on the gas comparatively to Dan, who's only got the 1 SCV mining gas right now. Yep, it looks like that's the case. He's got 3 mining gas, so we're probably going to expect some kind of either a factory play, maybe some tech lab play. Probably not, though, considering that he's building this 2nd Marine. We'll get the SCV pick, so good pick there. Unable to see anything is Dan as we look at it. Unable to see anything in there at all. On the other hand, we can look at MrWin. He's able to see the 2nd barracks coming down. And that there's no wall. I don't know if, did he see the tech lab? He saw some lab coming down. Not sure if he saw it was a tech lab or a reactor or whatever. Another barracks coming out, so we have 3 on the gas. This is interesting. Not exactly sure what we're expecting to see here, as it looks like it will be a tech lab. If it's Reapers, it's going to be late, and to be honest, this is not a very great map for Reapers, as the only place to jump up are on these 2 ledges, and they have to go super far away before they can get here. Obviously not a map you want to use Reapers on, so I hope that we don't see Reapers, because that would be a very poor choice. We see another racks coming out, 3 racks. Stim coming in, so it looks like it's going to be biological all the way. Another refinery coming out. Let's see if he decides to put 2. Yep, he will put an instant 2 SCVs on it, so 6 SCVs mining gas right now. Good scan right there. Dan's going to be able to see the 3 barracks with a tech lab. And he's going to be pretty even right now, as this is actually pretty smart on his play. He's going to go for the early engineering bay, maybe trying to get out an upgrade here, possibly, if he gets his gas up. Factory coming out as well. So the reactor's pretty good. He'll be able to surplus. He'll be able to get Marines out at the same rate as MrWin right now. Take a look at, he's also going for a factory, but the 3 racks made his factory a little bit later. Not too big of a deal, but as we saw last game, Dan had about 16 to 20 Marines on the field right around the 6-minute mark. Not quite the case this time, as the factory came down earlier now, so maybe opting for some possible siege tanks. He needs to be putting down a tech lab, though, as soon as he gets 50 minerals, but it looks like he's going to opt for some more SCVs. And some more Marines. No tech lab yet. Another good scan. He's going to see a starport coming down, the factory down, no add-on, so that's a good use of a scan right there. If we take a look at the units, we can see the harvester count is even. We got infantry level 1 coming out, tech lab coming down on the factory. So looks like both players are going to play for a little bit of a mid to late game strategy, as the starport play we're going to assume is probably going to be dropships. So definitely late if you're going to do Banshees, and his income is not going to be able to support that. Lots of gas, just no minerals to go with that approach. So we will see what happens. It's going to be, yep, it's going to be interesting. I didn't notice the reactor coming down on the factory. Medevac jumping in right now. I guess he's going to jump these around and put the starport on the reactor to pump out. Yep, that's what it's going to be. Put out some more medevacs. So 3 racks, medevacs. Looks like it's going to be Marines, a few Marauders. Standard MMM play for the Terran at the bottom, MrWin at the bottom. We need to see him to get an expansion, though. He does have map control, a little bit map control, not as much as he would want, obviously, but enough to know that there's not an immediately threat in the army, and looks like he is taking my word on that. He's going to go and take some more of his force out there to get some more map control. Hopefully we'll put down this expansion here relatively soon. Dan also needs to be thinking about doing the same thing, as he looks like he's just content and just harboring in. I'm wondering if the Banshee play made him feel more reserved. He still did not put in a turret, and as the early engineering bay goes down, you might as well just throw up a turret. Oh, actually, I'm lying. It's right there. It's blind as all hell. So just ignore what I just said, because he's doing exactly what you need to do as a Terran player. Just throw a turret down near the back part a mineral line or closest to the orbital, so it does not block as many SCVs as possible. You can also put it like right in this area. You'll be able to cover anything from right around there, which is most of where you're going to face your problems from Banshees. It looks like there might be a little bit of a drop play coming in here from MrWin. And both players spending their resources pretty well. Command center almost done here. Dan is starting his right now. Shields coming out for MrWin. Shields have been produced for Dan. No stim though quite yet. Needs to be make sure he gets that, as it will be crucial as he does have the starport out. Supply depot. Oh, this is interesting that I went to talk about last game. It's a really interesting spot to put your supply depots. Typically on this map, I'll kind of like hover them around, you know, like closer to your mineral line. I mean, obviously they can get harassed here by Banshees more if they're right here, but this is taking up a lot of building facility. Like I mean, maybe if you put your starports back here, you can justify that. But I mean, they're encroaching a little bit on where he can put his barracks is, and it just kind of looks, I don't know, kind of gets a little messy and kind of gets things a little cluttered. Whereas on the other hand, on this side, you can see that these are going to be easily protected if he just throws up a turret anywhere, if there's any kind of airplay. A sensor tower coming down early for Dan, as he's opting to protect his front line, as he will get this natural finished up. And it looks like saturation is not occurring right now for his natural, MrWin's. Another thing, as a another small thing that can help benefit your economy, once your natural comes down, take some of your SCVs or your harvesters out of your natural and make sure you put them over here, because that allows you to produce SCVs from both of your home bases, whether they're command centers or if they're nexuses or hatcheries. You can produce out of both of these instead of just one. You obviously are able to get your harvester count up faster while not sacrificing any income whatsoever. In fact, you'd be boosting it. The more SCVs you get out, obviously the faster income you will be bringing in. And it looks like just pretty standard play right now. Engineering bays going down. These will be getting reactors. And we can see there is still a lot of minerals sitting around right now, and it's getting to the point where I would expect that. Nothing coming out of the factory. Oh, I lied, spoke too soon, but there is no siege coming out quite yet for MrWin. On the other hand, siege has been completed for Dan, and he could be buying some more siege tanks right now, opting to stay with a lot of queued up Marines. That's almost a little bit too much, considering that he's could be building, you know, some siege tanks across the bat, and he's also not moving his army out right now. So maybe a little bit better micro there, but that's actually a really smart drop. I actually missed the first part of that drop, but it's going to take out a lot of it. So good drop there. No protection. It looks like he will be able to take these out pretty hot. Damage is done. If he doesn't repair this refinery, it will fall. It looks like he's not going to repair it. Dan, repair the refinery. There you go. Okay, good. So that's a good dual-pronged attack right there, as I was too busy worrying about the refinery to look at what was going on the front line. So all he did there was just pull back this drop, move in his second force, take that. He needs to keep pushing, though. When you have that control, I mean, you got to think about this. I mean, I guess the only thing that I can consider being the case here is he figured that this giant army of Marines was coming down to support. But what he just did was he gave up all of his position on this ledge. You can choke off a lot in this area. If you find yourself in a bad spot, just stim yourself back behind these rocks and help yourself out. He also still had 2 drop medevacs that could drop back here, so he could just keep playing back and forth with this force of 38 Marines. 38 Marines, wow, seems like there's not that many out there. These 38 Marines that Dan has here, just keep him bouncing back and forth or make him split those up. Not the case, though, as he does try to retreat back and regroup for some reason, and getting a 3rd. Now, he is taking the advice, he did get the good push, he has map control, he can make his 3rd base, but let's think about that for a second. How saturated is your natural? It's not. There's nothing there. So again, I mean, it's a good insight to try to go for that 3rd, but to kind of take a look at our step ladder and like how to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, he pretty much just moved from step 1 being his first base, step 2 being get a natural, to step 4, get your 3rd. He never saturated this base. As you can see, there's only 1 on gas and only like 6 on minerals here. He can be producing more SCVs. He is actually supply blocked right now at 118. So again, mismicroing there as he's going to drop mules to try to help that income come in, which he's got a lot of. And again, one thing you need to be doing as a Terran player, okay, good, 2 SCVs are building on the supply depots, and he is hotkey them to go back to mineral line. But what you can do is after you do the whole hotkey for supply depot, which is just BS, just shift, do it again, and left-click around the map. You'll be able to just keep placing supply depots, and you can have one just microwaving the hell out of supply depot management. And again, now we can see that, MrWin had this really, really good positioning on Dan, but it didn't really come out the way he wanted to, the way I would like to wanted to have him do it, which was to hold his ground here and to keep pushing his way around and maybe even taking out that natural or having some more drop play here. But drop play is just something that takes some time to work on. I mean, obviously you see a lot of the pros doing a lot of counter drops to when they get pushed on. They usually have 1 in reserve or 2 in reserve. But in a situation like he had these 2 drops with the same amount of troops he has now, and he dropped on this section of the map, he took out a good number of the SCVs working in the mineral line, took out, I think, the factory as well, and maybe some supply depots. He forced all of this army of Dan to retreat back, and he still had a pretty good-sized force sitting around the front part of the base. He could have moved in to help out and just keep playing back and forth between drops and pushing attacks. It doesn't need to be a full commit, retreat, like we saw him do, where he committed here, retreated all the way back to his base, and then committed here, then retreated all the way back to his base. You can hold that position that you have. I mean, you're in a good spot. He had a successful drop up here, MrWin did. And it obviously was going to force Dan to think much more defensively, obviously, as he put down 2 missile turrets. So this drop might not be as successful. However, he can sneak in and drop on a partial little corner. He'll be able to get most of those dropped off if he does manage to do that. 2 and 2 coming out right now for Dan, so that's good as only level 1 is coming out for MrWin. Very slow getting the 1 and 1. We see the surplus of minerals is very, very high in the bank. Take a look at the income tab. It's just crazy how much income's coming in and how little of it's being spent. A little bit of a scouting trip right here by Dan, and MrWin does not need to retreat here. He just needs to set up his siege tank and he'll be fine. So Scan would have done that trick just fine. If you could have scanned, it would have been a easier hold there. Wouldn't have to have the stim, wouldn't have to retreat the heal back. But Dan doing very well, getting good position here. I don't know if these siege tanks are supposed to be coming over here or not. I don't think they were, as he does take them back, which is good because they're about to get completely stomped over. Again, Dan, I would have liked to see put his siege tanks back this way. He's not taking full control of this tower, and actually MrWin is able to see everything right now, his whole entire force. And he does see these 2 turrets as well, so no big deal there. And it looks like we got some Vikings on the field, interestingly enough. Production doing a lot better, and this is what I like to see. The hotkeys are doing well. 1, 5, and 6 are his hotkeys for his production buildings. There's a lot of good things getting queued up. The barracks will be emptied out now, but hopefully he sees those and he keeps continuing to build. A successful drop here as he did sneak 5, and it looks like it's going to be a full take overall, as this drop did force Dan. Well, actually, it only forced him to pull some of his units, and he is not moving the rest of his units to come through here. All MrWin needs to do is heal up sit around by the top of this ramp, and he will have a victory here. As I don't even think it's going to matter either way, as he can just come in and just start taking out production buildings. And not a good spot here for Dan, as it looks like MrWin is going to take this game unless something miraculous again happens here. Dan not using his siege tanks very well. Downhill advantage, didn't clear out this army either, so it's going to be a little bit of a cutthroat action here, as it will be a double-sided, and that's going to disintegrate Dan's army straight up, even though Dan is winning very heartedly on the upgrade battle. But too much damage being paid here, as it looks like it will be a GG coming out for Dan here any second, as it is 33 supply to 127. There it is. GG across the board. We'll get these guys back in the game, and we'll talk to them a little bit about what's going on here. Good game, guys, overall. Things go a little bit better for you guys that time around as far as managing production and expanding and all that?
Well, possibly in that sense, but I made some really bad decisions.
Yeah, still some poor choices that came across the board for both players, but I think, I mean, you look at the tab right here. We don't have to go through this replay if you guys don't want to. But you take a look at the resources, units, and structures. Obviously, the little bit of harass helped a lot. That was a very well-constructed drop for you, MrWin. However, what you did that I didn't like, and you could have done better, when you're trying to figure out dropship play, and I won't talk too much about it because it takes a little bit to actually get used to, but when you're working on drop play, one thing you need to be cognizant of is the fact that when you have a successful drop land and start doing havoc to a mineral line or production facilities, which you had actually both going on at that point because you had a really good spot for that drop, it's going to force your opponent to pull just about everything he has to stop it from getting any worse than it already is. And luckily for you, you actually had a pretty good-sized second army waiting around for that to happen, and you had that second attack actually orchestrated very well. The thing that I didn't like, though, was it was an attack, retreat, rather than a kind of a tug of war going on between the two. You could have actually held your ground with your second army, forced him, after you picked up your drop, to retreat back to his natural to try to stop that, and then when that army faces your second army, you could drop again on top of it to take out more damage, and we could have made it just a push and pull thing, and he would have ended the game right there, to be honest. But that's just one thing you'll figure out as you go on further and further as you try to play around with dropship play. Specifically for you, MrWin, very good with the second expansion as you got your push going, getting your natural. And then the one thing you got to make sure is, if you kind of think about the step ladder as far as your economy goes, obviously step 1 is you have your base. Step 2 is saturating your main. Step 3 would be to get your natural set up. Step 4 then would be to saturate your natural, and then step 5 would be to build your third base. You kind of jumped that saturate your natural step to go straight to building your third, and you actually kind of hurt yourself a little bit in how much economy you could have been producing. But I mean, it didn't really make a difference in the end because you still had a lot of economy that you could have been spending. You'll be better at budgeting your minerals and budgeting your time and what you can be producing the more you play around with it. Just make sure you're cognitive of what you're saturating and when you're saturating it, and when that occurs within when your other expansions are coming down. Dan, on the other hand, you did a good job trying to secure your natural that time, which was very well played. You didn't get very good map control, though, and it hurts you from getting your third up, and obviously you could have been building more siege tanks in there rather than sitting on queuing up so many Marines. I know that we were talking about queuing up Marines when you move your army out, but that's when you're trying to go for an attack that goes further than just map control of your natural. You had like 10 Marines queued at one point between your two barracks, and you could have put some of that surplus into building siege tanks, and it would have helped you out a lot more defensively, and also making sure that you were pushing slowly but steadily across the map to make sure he wasn't so cutthroat on every single one of your bases at every single angle. That's kind of
that's because at that time I didn't have the production facilities for siege tanks, so I was just trying to get rid of having so many minerals and doing it too quickly. Yeah,
that's definitely an issue, and obviously as you have your natural and you were securing it, a tendency of lower ladder players is they're nervous to build production buildings outside of their base. Like, outside of their natural bubble and outside of the bubble between the natural and your main, it's okay. Like, those buildings have a lot of health, and considering the fact that you have an army there to support yourself, you can use those buildings as more of a buffer actually to help yourself keep from getting pushed on as easily. Especially when you're considering the play that MrWin was doing against you, where he had the drop play and then an army coming in. You could have slowed down that second army push if you had actual production buildings there. Obviously, that's an investment, but it would have helped you surplus your army between the two stations a little bit better. But don't be nervous about building out more what would seem like in the open, especially on a map like Daybreak. If you watch a lot of the more advanced players play, they will actually build almost all of their production facilities in between their natural and their third base, and use the ramp of their third. They'll kind of more wall that off with their production buildings because they have more health and they can take those beatings, and it also doesn't force you to have multiple armies at multiple bases. So things to consider. Obviously, the more you play, the more you need to play around with those key factors of, bracing yourself for an economy. But overall, for Terran versus Terran play, you guys both had good mindsets going into it. It was just the slightest things, especially when you're playing a mirror matchup, no matter what it is. Upgrades typically win battles in those, so the faster you time your upgrades, and when you time them with siege tanks, and when you time them with things like stim and medevacs, and when you want to plan your drops, those timings are really, really crucial, and the more you play around with it, the better off you'll end up being in the long run. But overall, definitely better improvements. I definitely recommend that you guys check out the replays and see those things that we're talking about, and just kind of take an eye on one thing or the other. But as far as Terran versus Terran basics, and looking at the first game, which was a Banshee Harass, which went pretty well, and the second game, which was more just, biological army versus biological army, the drop play was pretty solid too, and those are obviously two solid strategies that Terran players like to use a lot, nevertheless, against another Terran player. So, very well done for both of you. Thank you guys for hanging out and tuning in and being a part of the How to StarCraft series. Yeah, I'm going to say my sign-off here, and you guys are free to do whatever you want. So that's our How to StarCraft series. To kind of talk about Terran versus Terran, I guess we kind of a little bit overstepped from just the basics principle. There were some basics in there, though. So anyone who's out there watching, and if you tune in to watch this on YouTube, which will be uploaded here pretty momentarily, just make sure you keep practicing those things, and you just know when to balance yourself between spending, building an army versus building your production facilities, and when to actually reinvigorate your economy. Those things are also very, very crucial. And take a look back at the Banshee play in the first game if you missed that. Some good stuff going on there, and a lot of things to say just overall. I am Alan Tilt Donofrio. After much talking about all of this, gonna get some water, gonna take a break. This is the How to StarCraft series on Incline TV. If you want to be a part of our series, take a look at our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Incline TV. And in the info details, there is a section of how to be on the show. Be more than welcome to have anyone come on at any level and work on whatever you want to be working on. If you have a friend that wants to do it with you, well, more the merrier. Bring them on through. If you want to be a caster on Incline TV, the information is, again, on our Twitch account. You can also check us out on Twitter at Incline TV. And feel free to hit us up there. Again, I'm Alan Tilt Donofrio, signing off from this episode of How to StarCraft. Take it easy, and make sure you guys macro hard.